What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. As you know, we are rebranding this offseason, now going by Dynasty Drip. But we got our boy Andy, the Flex Friday man himself, back on the channel. Andy, nice to see you, man. I see some new decorations behind you as well.
Yeah, thanks. The wife and I finally went on our honeymoon. Spent a month in New Zealand, so had to bring back a few different things, including a copy of Theoden's Sword from Lord of the Rings, because, what doesn't scream love like the sword of a dead, made-up king? So
that's literally what I always say. That's on my wall. It's just in front of me, and I use it to motivate myself. But what Andy and I are going to do today is we're going to kind of do a little blended topic of sorts. These are going to be kind of sleeper / breakouts, depending on how high profile. And we are only going to use players basically on their rookie contracts. So no incoming rookies and no guys on their second contracts. So year 2, 3, and 4 players. And Andy's going to kick us off with his first player. Andy, who do you got for us today?
Well, if you see behind me next to the sword, I've almost always got to throw a Packer in here, but there's also just so much room for one of these guys to break out, and I'm going with Dontavian Wicks. We thought it was going to happen last year. He was a big sleeper. We talked about Dobbs, Watson, but now he's almost nearly left for dead. He's still 23 years old. He has a lot of potential. Didn't take that big leap forward. In fact, kind of the opposite. He was 6th in drop percentage last year, dropping over 11% of his targets, which is terrible. Slightly better than his teammate Jaden Reed, who dropped even more passes, and a little worse than his teammate Romeo Dobbs. So I think the whole Packers wide receiver room really needs to get on the jugs machine this offseason. But the good news is drops are not a stat that usually sticks around. I mean, for example, JSN was around the same his rookie year. He was at about 10 or 11% in drop percentage. This last year down to 3.4%. And as a big Green Bay fan, I meticulously watch all of their games. And Wicks just has this little wiggle. He moves a little different. He's really good at running routes. There's just some stuff he needs to polish up, being, a young wide receiver. And I think, with his route running, he has the potential to take a big step forward. There was another Green Bay wide receiver who wiggled a little differently back in 2015 and dropped a lot of balls the second year. And now I'm not saying that, Wicks is going to be like Devontae Adams, but he has a little special movement that these other wide receivers don't. So it's still, you're taking a shot on him, but right now Keep Trade Cut has him around a mid-third round pick. And if I'm looking for a high upside guy at receiver, I mean, I think at that price, I'm definitely willing to take the gamble, knowing it might not pay off. But, this is one of those post-hype sleepers that usually every year or two, there's guys who we love one off season. They don't perform. Everybody leaves them for dead and forgets about them. And then they blow up and do their thing. So, I'd be willing to throw it out there for my guy, Dontavian Wicks.
Yeah. And I mean, and just in the room, we have to keep in mind is we really don't know when Christian Watson will be returning. So what was thought of as potentially a 4-headed wide receiver core last year, honestly, we could maybe get a whole season without Christian Watson. His knee injury looked pretty bad and scary for him, who was already kind of a guy who would deal with a lot of injuries. So if Wicks gets the snaps, he has a chance. And then I think too, just last year, I don't know if it was just kind of second year starting, people had tape on him, but it was a quote unquote down year for Jordan Love, just due to his expectations coming off the season he had done previously, which was he was super hot and really high in all of these categories. And last year they kind of just reverted and rode Josh Jacobs. Now, the thing is, they could do that again because it seemed to be working. But also, I just, like you said, Wicks he has it. There's something he has that is something you can't really teach. And he is an explosive player. He just has to put it together. And we don't really know what's going to happen, but that's the reason he's going for a 3rd round pick and not a guy who is untouchable as an asset to acquire or something. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And to anyone watching the show, comment and trade below if you've had any trades involving Dontavian Wicks, but like you could probably get Wicks tossed in on a deal. Like, I don't really know, or something I've mentioned on previous deals. I actually mentioned it with a guy who we're going to speak about later today, is guys who aren't super highly like asked about or highly valued are the perfect kind of players to trade down in the rookie draft and just acquire that player, where you may be really only losing a couple percentage points of potential hit rate by moving from the 211 to the 4-2. Can you just get 4-2 on Dontavian Wicks and like potentially still take a stab at another asset, even at 4-2? But moving on to my next player here, we're going to go with a running back who, going into last season, I wouldn't have ever thought I was going to put him in a video as someone I'm actually a little intrigued by. But I'm kind of intrigued by Tank Bigsby this offseason due to two things mostly. Number one, statistically and analytically, he basically outplayed Travis Etienne last year. Now, in a box, we don't really know exactly everything that was going on, but a lot of categories, especially like broken tackles and those sort of things, Tank Bigsby played a lot better than Travis Etienne last year. And with the coaching change coming into Jacksonville, I don't think either player is guaranteed to be the starter. And I think that's a good thing for Tank Bigsby, because obviously the draft capital is in Travis Etienne's favor, but potentially we saw it happen last season with the Bucs, with Liam Cohen as the offensive coordinator. Obviously he's now the head coach for Jacksonville, but going into the season, we thought it was going to be Rachaad White with a sprinkle of Bucky Irving. Come week 8 or 9, it was a lot of Bucky Irving with a sprinkle of Rachaad White. And I'm not saying that it's guaranteed to happen with Tank Bigsby, but I think this is one of those situations where take your chance. If you can get this guy on your team, I think he could show a big dividend just for the price he's currently going at. Nothing too special for Bigsby last year, but, he did average 0.7 yards over expected per attempt, which doesn't seem like a lot, but for running backs whose yard per carry numbers are usually between 3 and 5, like that's almost an entire additional yard that you're getting just from Bigsby breaking a tackle or doing something like that. But Andy, how do you feel about Bigsby this offseason and just his value in general kind of going into this pre-draft process?
No, I like Bigsby. And I think, a lot of what you said, about a new coach coming in is definitely looks good for him. And he carved out a role for himself just by being a better player last season. He was averaging around, 12, 13 touches a game, getting pretty much all the goal line work. I mean, Travis Etienne scored a touchdown week 1 and 2, and then that's it. And then Tank Bigsby had all of those opportunities, which of course are super valuable in fantasy football. Didn't get a lot done on the receiving game. That was still kind of going to Etienne, but we'll see how everything shakes up. So I think especially in like standard or half point leagues, his value goes up even higher. And for where he's going, I would love to take a shot on him. And I also think, this year's draft class is so strong at running back, but I don't think the Jags are going to be one of those teams because they have so many holes to fill to take a running back in, the first 3 rounds. Whereas there's a lot of guys I was looking at when we were talking about this, but I'm like, man, I could also see that team, taking one of these running backs in the first couple of days of the draft, and then this all goes out the window. Whereas with the Jags, I would be really surprised if they invested early in a running back. So I think
100%. And just like you said, on last week's video, I did a sell video and 4 of the players were running backs. And it's not that I'm guaranteeing their role is going to change. It's just that I'm scared, man. I would rather just not risk it and just take the safer value. And, maybe you miss out on one of them, but you take the safer hit. And I think that is kind of one of these things. But let's move into Andy's next guy. Going to be a wide receiver, first round pick from last year, Andy.
Yeah, we're going to go with Ricky Pearsall. And just the fact that he made it out on the field last year was a miracle. Coming back from something that traumatic, it's no surprise that his play was a little sporadic. Didn't get off to the hottest start, but definitely had some major flashes, especially at the very end of the season. Went absolutely crazy week 17 and 18. Looked great. This team moved on. Deebo Samuel is now in the Commanders. So there's still a lot of weapons on that team with Ayuk and Kittle and McCaffrey. And even Juwan Jennings looking good. So, but they invested a first-round pick in him, so that means they obviously see a future for him. I think he's going to get more involved as, he's rehabilitated from getting shot in the chest and has a whole year of this offense under him. And, he's going for an early second-round pick, which is close to where he was drafted last year when there were all these guys on the team. And now you take away Deebo Samuel, you get a little taste of what he can do and that he can be a special guy. So I think for that price, I would be willing to go in on Pearsall and see if he can become the number one target in this offense. There's and Nuke being traded too, so who knows there. But.
Yeah, like you said, I think that last comment sums it up perfectly. It's like nothing the Niners have done this offseason screams that they are super committed to a lot of the veterans on this team. They are tearing it down a little bit. They got rid of Deebo. They've floated rumors of trying to get Ayuk. I mean, I love Christian McCaffrey, man, but there's no guarantees there. Kittle's a dog. Not going to say anything bad about George Kittle and never would. And I think, dude, there's a sneaky chance. Like, same thing, kind of what we were talking about with Christian Watson, man. We do not know when Brandon Ayuk is coming back on the field. Like, his knee injury was a bad one. Like, I mean, there's tiers of these knee injuries, and his was like a multi-ligament. That thing looked really bad. So, you could get half a season with Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings as the two wide receivers. They build the right connection with Brock Purdy, and all of a sudden, Ayuk's the random one out. And now, just like you said, you're getting Ricky Pearsall for an early second-round pick. This could be the perfect draft class if you want a wide receiver instead of a running back. I think you would much prefer Ricky Pearsall to the wide receivers that are going to be there in the early second round of your rookie draft. Now, if you want a running back, I think you're in the right draft class. But wide receiver, I mean, you're getting a first-round pick from last season who really only didn't see the field due to something traumatic, like Andy said. It wasn't that he was struggling to get the system or having – I mean, it was an off-field issue, but it wasn't an off-field
there's
issue.
nothing you do.
It wasn't like in his head he was, being a bad teammate or something.
Yeah.
And even with someone, I mean, it's a crazy comparison, but like even with someone like Brian Robinson, right? The only other guy that got shot recently. I don't really know how to say this, but like, Brian Robinson looked a lot better the year after once he actually, was a little healthier. He came out really hot last year and had a pretty good season. And it just goes to show, like, Pearsall's going to develop a little bit, and he may have just been a little stunted due kind of to how his career started there for the Niners. But moving on to the next guy, this is someone, he's going to be a hot name this summer, man. And he's a hot name right now. I think what's going to be interesting is what the Panthers do in the draft. There is a lot of buzz about them potentially taking someone in the first round at wide receiver. A lot of Tet McMillan buzz going to the Panthers, which I would love that. Man, I think they need a playmaker. But that's why I'm okay taking a peek at Jalen Coker this offseason. It's just that sentence exactly. They need playmakers, and Jalen Coker had some pretty good analytical stats last year. He had a couple big games. He weirdly was a bigger deep threat than anyone thought he would be. Hilarious stat. So he's a very small sample size from last year, basically. That's the Jalen Coker game. Small sample size. He didn't get a big role. He had 400 yards. Not 400 yards, 478 yards, only 46 targets. According to NFL Pro, he has a plus 67 yak over expected. I think basically just because he broke multiple big plays on very small sample. Now, I'm not saying he's going to average 67 more yards, but I just found that stat to be too funny to not bring up. But he's a big play guy, and, we've got to be at least semi-excited with how the Panthers looked down the stretch last year. I almost threw Jatavian Sanders on this video as well. Same thing. I mean, they have Adam Thielen, who is aging. I think – I'm not saying I've given up on Xavier Legette, but for the price or whatever, I'd rather just go get Coker. And, they added Rico Dowdle. They didn't really add much to the wide receiver room. So I really don't hate taking a shot on Jalen Coker. I was able to land him on my team in one of the leagues for $412. Someone was like, we'll take any pick for Jalen Coker. and I happened to have the 412, and I was just like, "You said any pick? Like here you
Beautiful.
go.
Yeah, this is any pick."
412." And I'm going to trust my scouting of him in the NFL last year more than some of these college guys that we don't exactly know how they're going to translate to the NFL.
Yeah, and I think it's something too when you have an undrafted guy who, usually it's rare that they see the field, but I mean, by the end of the season, he was out there for like 90% of the offensive snaps, which that means that the team definitely believes in him. And, he was out there for a bunch of snaps, got injured, and then when he came back from injury, he was right back out there for all of those snaps. So they believe in him. He's got something that's a little bit special. And yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. And like you said, I think even if they draft somebody, I think he's proven that he's still going to, find a role in this offense. And, if that's your last literally 412 dart throw, I think he's already proven he can do something. Whereas how many picks that you take at 412, ever really even get a few snaps in the NFL, like actually have any fantasy value, where Coker's already shown that he has some fantasy value. So yeah. I'd
totally. Andy, I'm just going to quickly remove you and add you just to get your audio synced back up. Hopefully that works. We're back with Andy. You're good now, I think.
A little ventriloquist act over here.
Technical difficulties. It's totally fine.
Slow Montana internet.
Yeah, moving back to Andy's third player, a guy that did show a little something, but potentially had a concussion so bad last year that he didn't even see the field again. Andy, what about Cedric Tillman makes you a little excited going into this season?
I mean, there's a lot of things. And there's that 4-game sample size where he was wide receiver 8. I think if you condense it, even more, he was a top end guy for a few of those weeks, scoring well over 20 points, looked like an absolute baller. He's entering his third season, still, just about to turn 25. So still young, 3rd round draft pick. Unfortunately, he won't have Jameis slinging him the rock. I think that definitely helped his value. But he's being valued as an early 3rd round pick. And I mean, just the way that he exploded, being a 6'3", 215 pound, an absolute stud on the field who's proven it. I think if he wouldn't have had that concussion, and even if he wouldn't have exploded the rest of the year, but, had just some decent games, been a guy involved, I think his price would be way higher. I think it's one of those where he exploded, and then because of the concussion, everybody kind of forgot about him and how good he was for that little period of time where he was pretty much the wide receiver 1 on that team. And then Jerry Jeudy kind of stepped up and played well too. But for where he's going, being a young guy, who knows what the Browns are going to do at quarterback. I mean, they brought in Kenny Pickett. There's rumors of them taking somebody to replace Watson. But I think he has the physical tools and has already shown that he can be a difference maker on the football field. Whether that continues, if those are just the best 4 games of his career, maybe, but for a 3rd round pick, I am way willing to take that gamble.
Yeah, going on Keep Trade Cut, I'm looking at his positional rank from last year. Very interesting, exactly like you said. On October 15th, 2024, Cedric Tillman was valued as wide receiver 133. And on, November 6th, he was all the way up to 47. So that 4-game stretch, exactly, it slingshotted him up the dynasty ranks. And he's kind of stayed right around there. I think, like Andy was saying, he's like wide receiver 50-something right now, going for kind of a 3rd round pick. He's wide receiver 58 right now on KTC. He's a big body guy, and the Browns are very interesting. Like, no one has any clue what they're going to do. Like, they're going to take Abdul Carter. Are they going to take Shador? But the thing is, I mean, they have Jerry Jeudy. They haven't re-signed Elijah Moore. So their wide receiver room is basically Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman at this point. And they got a lot of holes. I really doubt they take a wide receiver super early. They could use a running back. They could use a quarterback. They could use offensive linemen. They could use everything, man. They're really in a position where I think they do want to give Cedric Tillman a look, like Andy's been saying. He just caught a weird injury last year. And I guess we're going to find out this year if, can he continue on that stretch he had, or is that just going to be one of those Travis Fulgham stretches of a monster month long, and then
insanity of Cedric Tillman.
You just never hear about him again. But I like Cedric Tillman. I think he can be a good player, and I think he does complement Jerry Jeudy well. We just got to see who's going to be the dude throwing the ball there in Cleveland this offseason. So here is a spicy one for you. I didn't even write his full name. I don't want to type it out, but I love my boy Chigakonkwo on the Tennessee Titans, a guy who falls perfectly in the same category as Dontavian Wicks, post-type sleeper, man. People were on Chiggy about a year and a half ago. Athletic freak of a tight end, and I still really like him. He was just playing with Will Levis last year, and good luck, man. Nicole Westbrook-Akine, really the only guy able to score touchdowns with Will Levis. But this could be a new dawn for the Titans, man. Everything is pointing towards the betting markets, the media, everything when you say, it's all pointing towards Cam Ward being the new quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. I love Cam Ward. I think he has a lot of very good potential in that system. And Chig is still a very athletic tight end. He sets up much better to be a fantasy football tight end than a real life NFL tight end. He kind of is more of that H-back Delaney Walker kind of type where you kind of want to just, get him on some wheel routes, get him on some drags, and let this dude run. There were a couple big plays he broke last year where this dude looks like an athletic freak in a league full of athletic freaks. So right now with Chigakonkwo, man, he is just not really being valued. And something that the longer I've played Dynasty, the more I really have started to put stock in is I love targeting these tight ends that are kind of tight end 20 and later or so, because the thing is, if a tight end hits, they are a starter for someone, which usually means they can either potentially start for your team or they can open up a trade talk with someone because they need a starting tight end. Where as much as we like a guy like Jalen Coker, for example, I love Jalen Coker. I would love to have him on my team. He's being valued, some late wide receiver. Him hitting could be him being wide receiver 36, which still may not really be a starter on everyone's team. But a starting tight end can sometimes open that door to get a trade done because they're an every week starter for a dynasty manager. Just an interesting tidbit, I think, is something that people undervalue about potential tight ends. But Andy, what do you like about Chigakonkwo, or are you in the opposite camp that you just don't believe in him this year?
No, I like Chig. The first thing that I have written down is, physical freak. 6'3", runs a 4.5, has a 36-inch vertical. He's really just a giant wide receiver who plays tight end. And, there's a little stretch at the end where they finally started getting him the ball again. And, it brought back that buzz from like his rookie year where everybody was all over him. Still only 25 years old. And, I think we've been spoiled a little bit by like Brock Bowers and Sam Laporta breaking out and being great their rookie seasons, where that is not usually the case for tight ends. Usually it takes a few years for them to develop. You see it at the end of year 2 or in year 3. But when you're stuck with Will Levis as your quarterback on the Titans, it's going to be really tough to have a year 3 breakout. So anybody that they bring in is probably going to be better. I think Cam Ward is a great fit. I think he would be great. And, where he is right now, like valued around a late third, if you need a tight end or even just want to get deeper, like you said, potentially have a better asset to trade, I think his value, is probably only going to go up from where he is. I think he's worth the gamble because of the flashes that we've seen and what he can do.
Yeah, and just like with the Titans this offseason, they didn't really get any offensive perimeter players in free agency. They obviously did attack the offensive line, which I think was good. And when it comes to their draft picks, it's like obviously they have 1-1. They're going to have that early second round pick as well, but they do not have their third round pick. So, sure, could they go quarterback at 1 and then wide receiver at 33 or whatever potential? But that still really only leaves them with Calvin Ridley, their second round pick, Chigakonkwo, Tajay Spears. Cam Ward is going to have some hype around him, and he's a guy who likes to extend the play. He's going to want to get the ball to athletic players like Chigakonkwo. And just one last thing, I was just checking, tight end 29 right now. So don't tell me you can't get this guy. Dude, he could be on the waiver wire in some shallow dynasty league. It's really nothing too crazy. And sometimes these guys do pay off for your roster. So going to Andy's last player, a guy I obviously love and would love to have on my dynasty teams this offseason. But JJ McCarthy, Andy, you buying the hype even though the cheesehead is behind you?
Yeah, I guess. Unfortunately, I am. We didn't have the rookie season to see, what he could have exactly been. But on the bright side, he was super young when he got drafted. He got to sit and learn for a full year as he was recovering. And I think if that organization didn't believe in him, they probably would have re-signed Darnold, brought in somebody else. Because, Darnold had a great season up until the last few games where he kind of totally fell apart. But now, they're getting Darisaw back on the offensive line. They had a really solid offensive line when he was in there, and he's got one of the greatest, pass catching weapons, groups in the entire NFL. I mean, anytime you get a throw to Justin Jefferson, and then you also have Addison, you have Hawkinson, you have Aaron Jones. Like, he's in one of the best situations you could ask for a young quarterback. They've got a good head coach. So, I think he's totally set up for success. And it seems like they believe in him. And, he's going for right around where he went for last draft. You're talking around like a mid-first round pick. And, potentially if he was in this year's draft class, he might be the number one quarterback. He'd at least be up there with Cam Ward. Like, I think he'd at least be the number 2 quarterback off the board. Last year's quarterback class was just so deep and so good that, he went back, it was around pick 10, pick 12, something like that. Whereas I think he'd be drafted a lot higher this year. So if you're looking for a quarterback and Cam Ward's gone or you're not buying it, I would love to trade a mid-first round pick to get McCarthy if that's what I need for my team, in a super flex.
Yeah, I mean, I would very comfortably trade probably 1.5, 1.6. I mean, if I'm looking at a quarterback, I would much prefer taking a shot on JJ McCarthy on any quarterback in this draft not named Cam Ward. I think Cam Ward's exciting, and he does have potential rushing upside. But JJ McCarthy, man, like you said, I mean, looking back, like how many weapons like this have we really seen? Like, dude, these are stacked offensive team, the Minnesota Vikings are, with their pass epic. Like, Jordan Addison would be the wide receiver 1 on half the teams in the NFL, easily. I mean, their coach is potentially the best QB whisperer in the league, the way he's hit on these last 3 years. I mean, I just did a video where I mentioned buying JJ McCarthy, and it was for all the reasons Andy brought up. I mean, look at Kevin O'Connell's track record over the last couple of years. Kirk Cousins looked amazing, goes to Atlanta, sucks. Oh, yeah. He made Nick Mullins usable in fantasy, Sam Darnold usable in fantasy, Joshua Dobbs usable in fantasy. We don't think he can do that with a first-round pick. Like, he's just going to run the offense, man, and these guys are going to be open for him. You can't double all those players. Not to mention, even like Jalen Naylor has very good like analytical stats. 24.6 receiving EPA above average. Like, that's their slot receiver who made some big plays for him last year even. So I'm with you, man. I love JJ McCarthy, and he might be one of those guys where, there's obviously risk involved. He's a rookie. We haven't seen him really play in the NFL regular season yet. But if JJ McCarthy comes out and has 4 to 5 good games, in the first 6 or 7 games of the NFL season, he moves up probably to quarterback like 8, and you just never get him.
Way up.
That's it. Your chance is gone because now he's paired with Justin Jefferson for his entire career, and you have no chance at getting JJ McCarthy. So I'm 100% with you. That division is going to be spicy. If Ben Johnson can turn around the Bears, obviously the Packers are consistent. The Lions have been dominant. The Vikings were great last year. If the Bears turn around, like, good, those games are going to be fun to watch, like every single one of them. So moving on to my last player, I'm going to double dip. I did talk about this guy as a sleeper, but I couldn't leave him off the list today because I just think he fits too well. Going back to the Jacksonville offense, I'm going with my boy, Parker Washington. For me, he just kind of reminded me of a Christian Kirk clone whenever I saw him on the field. And it just so happens they let Christian Kirk leave this offseason. Not to mention their wide receiver core is Brian Thomas. I think then it goes me and Andy and Parker Washington. They basically don't have anyone. De'Ami Brown. I'll give him a little credit. De'Ami Brown. That's it, man. Like Brenton Strange. I like Brenton Strange too.
Gabe Davis.
Yeah, I think Gabe Davis technically still there.
Well,
Think about putting Brenton Strange on this list.
Yeah.
He's just got a lot of hype, so I don't want to talk about Brenton Strange. I think a lot of people are all over the Brenton Strange hype. But I think Parker Washington could be a sneaky kind of flex play for you next year. I'm not saying this guy's going to explode and come on the scene because he's an athletic freak. He's totally opposite of Dontavian Wicks. Dontavian Wicks could be an amazing player or just be absolutely nothing. And I feel like Parker Washington is more just like a nice role player, good slot guy, good zone beater. He reminds me a lot of Christian Kirk. And, Trevor Lawrence had a pretty good connection with Christian Kirk a couple years ago. Weird year last year. Kirk was hurt. But I just like what you're getting Parker Washington for. He's basically free. I recommended trading down from like 3.5 to 4.3 and picking up Parker Washington. I would do that every single day of the week. He's a guy I love to stash on my roster. I got him on a couple of rosters this offseason. And I mean, that's how I feel about him. I don't think he's some highly recruited elite first round asset, but I like having him in that roster slot 28, roster slot 29, where if he starts hot in a PPR league, I think this guy could get 70 catches for 700 yards and be a guy that you could plug in every once in a while to your lineup.
Yeah, I think I agree. I see him more as like a plug-in guy than a guy who could really explode, but also you never know. And, Jags also getting rid of Evan Ingram, who had so many targets on that team. There's a massive target void that's got to go somewhere. They can't all go to Brian Thomas Jr. As awesome as that would be for him, like they can't all go to him. So he's a guy out there who's shown, he can at least get it done to a certain extent. And, looking on Sleeper, he's available in 50% of leagues right now. So he could just be on waivers for you to go pick up, especially if teams have to cut down before the rookie draft. There's a chance that if somebody's got a lot of draft picks, they have to make cuts. He's a guy that you just find on waivers as well. So, if you're looking to trade down to get him, throw out a late fourth round pick, or, just check your waivers and see, because he might wind up there. And if you can pick up a guy off waivers who can fill in during bye weeks or, go into a flex if you've got somebody who's injured, that's a great asset for your team just to be consistent. So,
yeah, 100%, man. And neither Andy or I brought this guy up today, and I'm not saying he applies to this list, but go get Rashid Shaheed on your Dynasty team.
Oh,
you need him. Rashid Shaheed's a GOAT, man. I believe in him for this year. I think he's going to be great. Kellen Moore as the OC. But Andy, thank you for coming on, man. Stoked to have you back for the off season.
Thanks for having me.
But yeah, any last notes from you on this video, or just even a farewell speech, man? If not,
no, I mean, I'm just happy to be back. Happy to be digging into some Dynasty again. Looking forward to the draft and seeing how it all shakes out.
Yeah, for sure. But thank you guys for joining us. As always, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment your opinion on any of these guys, any trades you've had involving them. If you get trade offers, like I said in my video last week, if you liked our takes, if you hated our takes, we want to know all of the above. You let us know. Thank you guys for joining, and we will catch you next week with another one. Andy, peace, buddy.